Hi everyone, my name's Sophie. I work for Star Academies, a multi-academy trust with schools across the country. I'm not a teacher, but I have the privilege of working with teachers and school leaders as part of my job. I am a mum, and while the challenges of helping children learn at home will be different for everyone, it's something none of us were prepared for a couple of months ago. To accompany our home learning advice line, StarLine, we are hosting a weekly broadcast with a range of guests to cover different ideas to help you keep your kids learning and happy. This week, we've invited Rowan Davies, Head of Policy and Campaigns at Mumsnet, to bring us 3 of the questions that are trending in discussion forums. StarLine has brought together over 200 education and parenting experts to provide support on our advice line. Today, we're going to put these questions to 3 of our specialists. Thank you for joining us, Rowan.
Hiya.
So can you tell us a bit about how Mumsnet users are finding the current situation in terms of home learning?
Well, I think it's fair to say they've been on a bit of a journey. So when schools first closed, I think it was about 7 weeks ago, we saw thousands and thousands of discussions, and the queries were, it felt like parents were trying to become teachers overnight. So we were getting lots of people saying, oh, yeah, I've got to do Key Stage 2 maths tomorrow. Like, can somebody link me to the curriculum and tell me what the best resources are? And then I think what's happened over the past few weeks is that parents have realised, number one, they can't just become teachers overnight. They're not trained to do it in most cases. But also, more importantly, that's not really what's expected of us. We're not expected to be introducing new concepts or, to be preparing anybody for public exams. And our jobs really are to, number one, keep our children safe, and number 2, to try to keep them sort of happy and motivated and engaged with the idea of learning. And if you can pull off both those things, then, amazing, you've done brilliantly. So that's been a really useful realization for a lot of parents, I think. But as that initial rush and kind of that rush of blood to the head has sort of fallen away a bit, what's replaced it probably is more specific queries. So that might be parents of children who have SEN, it might be parents who just don't have enough laptops or tablets at home to go around all of their kids. It might be people who are worried about their children's well-being or mental health, or people who are just really missing their friends. So sometimes those kind of specific queries probably are coming to the fore more now.
Yeah, that really echoes what we're hearing on StarLine as well. So can we start with the first question that you found parents are asking?
So we have a lot of parents on children who have children with SEN. And as I'm sure your experts will know, that encompasses a really broad range of different needs and difficulties and challenges and capacities. So that might be something like your child has dyslexia and you're finding the worksheets that school are sending home aren't really appropriate for them. Or it might be that you're finding a child's behaviour really challenging. But to try to bring it down to something specific, it would be really useful, I think, if your experts can tell us how you can engage children who maybe really struggle with reading or writing, how you can help those children to really engage with the task.
Okay, great. We're going to put that question to Gary Orban from Future Academies Trust.
Well, thanks for the question. There's a lot of that coming up at the moment, of course. Now, I won't try and answer that question specific to one type of need. And if you want that specific support, that's what StarLine is there for you to get some specific support tailored to your child. But to talk a bit more broadly and hopefully be relevant to quite a few parents here and carers, a child may find reading and writing difficult because they have dyslexia, because they have a language need, because they have a social and emotional difficulty concentrating. So I'll try and offer some advice that helps with a broad range of needs and that there's something helpful in there. So let's start with reading then. So if your child finds reading difficult, well, think about what the purpose of the work that's been set is, because it might be about the skill of reading and improving someone as a reader, or it could be about developing someone to get them better at history or better at science. So it's going to separate those two things. Now, for developing reading, parents, you are so important. You're the most important people, more important than teachers in terms of developing your child's reading. So please get them, whatever age they are, reading for 10 to 15 minutes a day, making sure that reading is out loud to you. Try and make it quality time between you and your child. I know that's impossible for some families at the moment, but if it can be distraction-free, quality time, 10 to 15 minutes a day between you and your child. And then when they're reading out loud to you, a book that hopefully they're motivated by and that has the right level of difficulty for them, there's some super skills, they say. So as a parent, when you hear your child read, ask them to predict, to tell you what's about to happen next, predict what's going to happen next in the next chapter or on the next page. That's going to help to show their engagement, that they're really engaged with this book. Clarifying, get them to tell you what certain words mean. If they don't know, make a note of it and look it up together, or get them to look it up after they've done their reading. Questioning, while the child's reading to you, just interrupt them occasionally. Say, oh, who is it talking now? Where is this scene set? Why did they say that? Just so that you're helping them to engage in the text, and you can correct any misconceptions. If they're not getting a bit of the story, you can correct it for them, or you can have a look at it together. And then finally, summarizing. Try and summarize something. Try and ask them to summarize something to you, to say what happened in that last chapter or on that last page. That's really going to help you to monitor how much they're actually understanding what they're reading. But for some children, some tasks aren't about the development of their reading skill. Some tasks are about using the skill of reading in order to get access to curriculum content, to understand more about history. So there might be a really long bit of history and a source in history that they need to read and then answer questions on. Or maybe you could read that out loud to them. Maybe that would be helpful. You read the source, they still have to do the work, but you're just helping them get over that stumbling block of them finding reading difficult. You could also try and do a similar thing, but make them more independent. So if they're online, all different web browsers have ways where the text on the screen can be read out loud, and you can find out or put below how to find out more about that. Equally, there's an app called Seeing AI, details on below the video, which you hold your phone up over some text and it will read it out loud. So that again helps your child to be more independent, but helps for any difficulties they find with reading. And finally, about writing. Well, there are other apps and things that can help. It could be that your child should be typing instead of handwriting. There's a website, typingclub.com, which helps a child get up to speed and do some speedier writing. Your child could even dictate their work on some of the newer versions of Microsoft Word. There is a dictate button on the tab, which could be helpful. Also, if you do want your child to be writing, and that is great in many cases, discuss the child's work with them, discuss what they have to do for science, write some notes while you're talking to them and leave them with those notes. And then that helps them to structure and scaffold their writing. Or perhaps put a little mark on the page, 4 lines down from where they are now, and say, when I come back, I expect you to have got to there. So it just helps to break that down and make success a bit more realistic for them. Finally, when you're looking at work, focus on the positives of the work. You may need to point out, please write a bit neater, don't get capital letters, there's an incorrect spelling here, but try first to focus on the positives and to focus on what they're doing well. Always find something good about the content, while also pointing out 1 or 2 things that they could change. I hope that's been helpful. And if you do want a bit more information, you can, of course, call the StarLine helpline and get something more specifically tailored to the needs of your child.
Thanks for that, Gary. This question touches on an area which we're getting lots of questions about on StarLine. And so while we've gone for quite a broad general question here, as Rowan said, we are also looking at doing a broadcast in future for parents of children for whom SEND represents a greater barrier to learning. What did you make of that response, Rowan?
I think people will find it really useful to have, that sort of specific input. I was really struck today. I was reading a discussion on our SEN forum in preparation for doing this. And one of the parents was saying to another user, never feel guilty because you're doing something differently from everybody else, because maybe that's just what your child needs. You know what motivates your child. You know what will get them to sit down and engage with something. And if that means you have to do things in a completely different way, then please, the last thing you should do is feel guilty about that. And I thought there's kind of probably a broader lesson there for all parents in this situation at the moment about not comparing yourself to what you're seeing on social media or, what your best mate is managing to do. We've all got our own specific situations, our own challenges. We've all got our own children. And ditch the guilt is a bit of a mantra on Mumsnet, and I think that's probably quite a useful one here. And the other one that struck me was there is something there about being brave enough to reach out and ask the question. I think there's StarLine, but also your children's school. I know that from communications I'm getting from my children's schools that teachers are actually waiting for parents to ask these questions. And they're probably quite glad to hear from you and to understand what your challenges might be and to try to offer you their professional experience. So there's something there about being brave enough to ask the question, I think.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with you. Ditch the guilt is a great mantra to have. So what would the next question be that you'd like to put to one of our specialists?
It's the topic of the moment this week, I think, among parents. But this whole question around whether and when children might be going back to school. We're seeing quite a lot of anxiety amongst parents about, particularly at the moment, about the risks of infection. And we know there's not an awful lot schools can do about that in terms of the policies that they're being asked to follow by the government. But we wondered whether there was something that your experts might be able to say about how parents can themselves maybe prepare for sending their children back to school and how they might be able to help their children get ready for it too.
Yeah, as you say, it's a hot topic at the moment. And of course, information and guidance from the government is being updated daily. But we've asked one of our specialists, Julie Bradley, to provide some ideas for those parents who are starting to think about the return to school.
We're all new to this, and each day we're feeling our way through each new scenario whilst we wait for others to give us guidance. But I think there's lots parents can do to prepare their children and themselves for schools reopening. I think firstly, it's really reassuring to know that schools will not reopen until science says it's safe to do so. And once schools know they can reopen, they're going to be working really hard on risk assessment, systems and procedures to make sure their schools really are safe for children to come back. Parents know their children really well, and they need to gauge just how their children are feeling about going back to school. Some children are really missing their friends and they're so excited about going back, they can't wait to get back, whilst others really will have worries, and we need to find out what those worries are as parents. We need to sit down, we need to talk to them. If they won't open up, perhaps create a worry box. They can write the worries down, pop them in the box, and those can be shared later when they feel like doing that. I think as parents we've got to be really careful not to share our worries with them, our anxieties, because I think that will be incredibly unhelpful and make matters worse for some children. It's got to be about their worries, about their fears. With that in mind, I think we've got to be careful about the news, what news they're hearing, what news they're watching. We've got to filter that. We've got to make sure it's factual, and we've got to make sure that it's helpful for them and not going to fuel their anxieties even further. I think there's some good news we can share with them, and I think we should do that. Recent research has shown that children, particularly young children, are at low risk of being severely affected by this virus, and I think that would be really reassuring for the children and for yourselves. And finally, it's about routines. We've got to get them ready for going back to school. And we all know how difficult it is when we've been on holiday, getting them up in the morning, getting them dressed out the door and to school on time. So I think we can start that now. I think we need to look at times for going to bed, get them to bed earlier, get them up on time, and create routines during the day that are more aligned to a normal school day. And I think if parents do these things, I think they can have confidence, and I'm sure the children will be more confident that they can do this and do it well.
Thanks, Julie. While not all children will be going back to school at once, that was some helpful advice for those who may be the first group returning to school. What are you hearing from parents that they want school leaders to be doing to reassure children about going back to school, Rowan?
I think what is really needed is that kind of reassurance that Julie gave. I think although parents and teachers don't always see eye to eye on everything, I think the truth is that parents do actually really trust teachers implicitly to have children's well-being at heart. And I think if schools can communicate to parents that they are confident about the measures that are being taken, they're confident that they can do this and that they can keep everybody safe, I think that will go a long way towards parents feeling confident and happy about the situation as well. So I think it's one of those situations where the more, as schools start to prepare for this and start to put measures in place, ready to welcome children back, I think the more concrete information they can give parents about exactly what's this going to look like. Is my child going to be sitting at a desk with a screen? Are they going to be staggered lunch times? The more information that individual schools can give parents about exactly how this is going to work, I think that will go a long way towards reassuring parents about the risks.
Yeah, I hear that, and we can feed that back to our network, so that's really helpful. Can you share the next and last question that we're going to put to our specialists?
I'll say that now everybody has done Joe Wicks, and we've all done Carol Vorderman maths, and we've all baked everything that we can find, and we're all getting a little bit bored, maybe. I think maybe the big question remaining is, what can we do to keep our children motivated?
That's a really good question, Rowan. After 7 weeks of lockdown and having young children myself at home, I know how testing this time is now. So I have three tips for you. And my first tip to help children keep motivated is that there should be some structure to the day. So if you are a parent of a primary school child, then perhaps you might want to consider doing home learning in the morning, because the children may get tired in the afternoon. And if you are a parent of a secondary school child, then perhaps in the afternoon. But definitely structure will help, and having a timetable and having routine will help motivate children and keep them on track. My second point is an interesting one. I think if you're not a teacher, don't try to be one, because if then you become authoritarian with your children, that's going to demotivate them. So if things aren't going to plan, it's fine. Be flexible. We're in a new normal, and use the opportunity instead to help your children pursue interesting learning and topics. They may have a hobby they've taken off. They may have suddenly discovered a love of cooking, and they want to cook with you. They may want to do more artwork and painting, and allow them some time to actually explore those avenues, because this lockdown has also given us a really good opportunity. It's given us time. It's given us time to discover hidden talents about us that we thought we didn't have. My third tip is actually to turn learning on its head. So how about replacing home learning, online lessons, with actually really exciting virtual trips, such as the Natural History Museum exhibition, an exploration of that, a visit to Chester Zoo to come and look at the animals. The other could be, if your children is interested in artwork, looking at the Tate virtual tours, and actually exploring the world in the comfort of your living room. What a great opportunity, to be able to visit other cities like Rome and Venice and Athens, because they're there for the taking. And that could be turned into learning, because that could inspire your children to then come back, do some artwork, do a piece of writing, and really go to town with having an experience of learning firsthand. My last tip, really, and I think it's the most important one, is that carry on smiling, carry on communicating, and carry on talking to your children.
So Shahina mentioned some tours that are available online, and we're going to share the links to those below this video. What were your thoughts, Rowan?
I thought it was a really interesting point about structure. And it's not always the kids you would expect to really miss that structure. So I actually realised last week that my younger son, who's in year 10, and he's usually very good at motivating himself and getting things done. So I kind of got out of the habit of checking in on him. And I suddenly realised that his structure had completely gone to pot. He actually did need a bit of input from me and from the school to say, look, you're going to feel better about this if you know what you're doing roughly at certain times throughout the day. And it was quite interesting. So I thought that was quite a strong point. And also the thing about not being authoritarian, you're not a teacher. that's not your relationship with your child. And if you suddenly get into a position where you're sort of standing over them saying that's not good enough or do it again, you sort of run the risk of having quite a horrible situation at home and probably not achieving very much anyway. So I thought that was quite useful.
Agreed. Well, thank you so much for that, Rowan. That was so helpful, and it was great for you to bring your experience of what parents are saying on Mumsnet, and hopefully some of those responses from our specialists have helped. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of StarLive, and thanks also to the 3 specialists from our StarLine team for responding to the questions that lots of you are asking at the moment. As Gary mentioned, these responses are quite general and just give an example of how our specialists can support. For more personalised advice and guidance, we would really encourage you to call StarLine on the number at the bottom of the screen, 0330 313 9162. We have a team of over 200 specialists able to support on a range of areas, from subject questions to questions about behaviour, from advice on supporting your child's well-being during lockdown to ways to plan a home learning schedule that works. Next week on StarLive is the one about staying calm when they're not, with Dave Whittaker, Director of Learning at the Wellspring Academy Trust. With extensive experience working with children and young people to manage their emotions, Dave will share approaches we can take to talking and responding to our children to help them join us in their calm rather than joining them in their chaos. We look forward to seeing you next week. In the meantime, stay safe.